going back to the picture, your team picture, you guys are either 4'2" or he's like 6'8".
It's Hassan. He's
basically
enormously tall. I think, Matthew, you've seen him in person, right?
Really? Okay.
Yeah, he's really tall. I was just stunned. He's a stunning man.
Wow.
Figure.
He's okay.
Steven, you're like 6'10", right?
He's tall, yeah. Oh, Steven, you're 6'10" too?
No, I'm 6'2.5".
Oh, you're pretty tall too.
Tall. Matthew, do you do much work out of the Middle East?
Not really. No, I have a handful of clients that will come from that region. So that's why we have to have experts on that can guide us.
Right.
In cases I have had from people from that region, sometimes always seem to have complications, oddly enough.
So we're really happy to be joined today by two of our colleagues, Alexa August. Am I saying it right?
Yes.
And Sharifa Abbasi.
Yes.
Saying that right too?
Yes.
Okay. You guys work out in Virginia with a friend of the show, Hassan Ahmad. Is that right?
Yes.
Hassan Ahmed at the HMA Law Firm.
Tell us a little bit about yourselves.
So my name is Sharifa Abbasi, as you mentioned. I work with Hassan Ahmed. We practice immigration law. My focus at the firm is mainly on the business immigration cases. I also handle most of the cases that are related to women, children, such as SIJS, VAWA. I also handle trial prep at the firm and removal cases as well. I appeared on a Dari talk show or a TV channel that had started here in Virginia for a couple of years. I would go there once a week and just talk about immigration issues and, just kind of give the Afghan community some information on the immigration process and would take some questions from them. I did that for about a year in 2016.
And you happen to be from Afghanistan originally, is that right?
Yeah, so I actually came here as a refugee myself. I was born in Afghanistan. We left the same kind of thing that is happening right now. It's kind of like a replay of my childhood. We kind of had to just leave everything last minute and try to get out of the country in order to save our lives. We left our house, our belongings, everything. We relocated to Pakistan, went through the UNHCR process, and then entered the US as refugees in the 90s. And I went through the entire immigration system here. I actually filled out my own NATS application as soon as I turned 18. So I'm very proud of myself for doing that, for being able to do that. So yeah, I went through the entire immigration.
When clients ask you, do I really need a lawyer for this? Are you like, no, I did it?
Well, it was a lot simpler. So no, that's not what I say. I say, yes, you need a lawyer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Especially given, everything that's going on now with all the hiccups in the system. So.
Right. What about you, Alexa?
Yeah, so I'm new to the HMA Law Firm. I joined about a month and a half ago. I am an immigration attorney. I spent time doing refugee legal aid and volunteer work with refugees in Greece and Jordan before I came back to the United States. I do mostly asylum and humanitarian-based law, but I've been branching out to all new sorts of areas now. When I was in Jordan, I was volunteering with the International Refugee Assistance Project, and I volunteered with them for 4 years during law school and after. I can't represent IRAP or their views. These are my own personal views, but that's my background and experience.
Awesome. Well, what's going on right now in Afghanistan has obviously been in the news. And online, everybody has their hot takes about situation. I wanted to really just drill down and focus on what's going on with immigration and the obstacles that exist and that pre-exist, I guess, the current situation. So I want you guys to talk to us as if we were really small, unintelligent children, because that's roughly the case.
We're not that small, though.
Matthew and I both have experience with consular processing, which is the process of bringing somebody from abroad to this country. For the folks who are unfamiliar with the process generally, what are some of the obstacles and frustrations in just generically bringing somebody to the U.S.?
Okay, I'll start because I have a lot of frustrations because I have a lot of cases from that side of the world that I deal with. So first issue, this is not really a consular processing case, but this is like a USCIS immigration issue that I deal with a lot with my cases from that side of the world. So generally people that were born in Afghanistan or, any country in the Middle East, South Asia, especially, if they were born before the 90s, including myself, like a lot of us weren't born in a hospital. We were born at home. There's no birth certificates. There's no like official record or documentation of our birth. And this doesn't just go for African clients. I have had to deal with this for my clients from India, from Pakistan, from some Arab countries as well. So that's an issue that people don't realize. I've come to realize that now since I've done so many of these cases, but people who file these I-130s for their family members, they'll generally send something, like even if they send a valid birth certificate, and if the birth certificate has a late registered date, that will trigger an RFE, basically saying that this isn't a valid birth certificate and you need to submit this document, or you need to show like secondary evidence of birth. And they have to go through the entire like ordeal of the RFE process. And that's just been like a general struggle that I faced like, across the board with all my cases from that region of the world.
And that's something I think that we all struggled, just the documentation thing. So just generally consular processing and trying to get all the right documents the way they exactly envision them can be really difficult, even in the best of circumstances, right?
Yes, of course. So aside from that, like giving them the documentation, that there's a lot of hiccups like in the system. One thing that I've noticed, and I'm sure if you guys have had consular processing cases, you guys have noticed as well, is how long it takes for them to transfer the case to the NVC. Like the petition is approved at the service center. I've had cases where it took over a year for them to just transfer it to NVC. And there was nothing we could do. We would call USCIS. Nobody could tell us where the case is.
Yeah, just for our listeners who aren't so familiar, a visa petition would be processed here, saying USCIS will say, yep, that person's good, they're good, here's that visa, they're good to get that visa. But the whole process has to go to another agency, the National Visa Center. So then there's that process that Sharifa is talking about that often takes a long time. It can be really frustrating because the client is all excited that their visas are gotten approved, and then you just have to wait. And then, of course, there's the black hole and there's very little transparency. So
I think anytime you can get two bloated federal bureaucracies involved in a single case, like you want to do that, right? So the case starts with immigration, then they have to do this awkward handoff to the State Department, basically. And then they hand it off to the consulate abroad. So there's really sort of these three opportunities for the case to disappear or be ignored or whatever.
Get lost in a black hole, like Matthew said.
We noticed a couple of years ago, they started to demand that the documents be uploaded to the website, this Consular Electronic Application Center, I think, SEAC. And, okay, a lot of people have access to a scanner, but now we have to scan them and then reduce them to a certain file size on Adobe Acrobat Pro. That's what we use. You could use other software.
Are they a sponsor of the show? I don't.
Yeah, I was gonna say
by Adobe Acrobat Pro. Be a pro, Acrobat Pro. And we started to get stuff rejected, and these are just Mexican cases mostly, but because like the corner of the birth certificate was folded down by like an eighth of an inch, or we had passports rejected because they were slightly askew. They weren't exactly square to the page. They were off just a little bit. Do you see that kind of technical nonsense going on in those cases as well?
Yes. It's very, very frustrating because one thing I was going to say is even with this like handoff from the service center to the NVC, so the first question clients ask is how long this case is going to take. And, we normally don't tell them, we don't give them a guarantee on the timeline as well. We give them like a rough estimate. And it's always, that's the biggest challenge for me because I know I can't ever give them a good estimate. Like I can't compute that time into the timeline in terms of how long it will take to hand the case over to the service center. Or even now, the cases that were completed at NVC, for it to get transferred to the embassy, it was taking forever. So that's always a challenge in terms of like adding that into the timeline, computing that into the timeline for the client. Sometimes, they transfer it right away, in less than a month. And then sometimes it takes a year or more. So that's one of the things. And then this, with uploading the documents through the SEAC system, The same thing, the clients don't understand that. We've had multiple times where documents were requested, it was uploaded, and then like a month later, we would get another email, another notification from NBC saying that this wasn't accepted, reloaded, or send it to us again, submit it to us again. And then, how do you explain that to the client that, oh, they didn't accept it because, a part of it was folded or it was like scanned at an angle.
And this is all the easy stuff, right? This is all the kind of the easy stuff, so to speak. And then we get to where everything gets sent over to the embassy or the consulate. Then they have to do the background checks and stuff like that. So this is even before we get to maybe the thing that a lot of people think really holds up cases. Like, what's your experience with, after you kind of get past the mundane things of loading documents and you finally get it all right, and they finally accept it.
Yeah.
And then, what, from your experience, do a lot of your clients have to go through or wait at that juncture?
A lot of my cases, before all of this stuff, a lot of my cases, like Afghan cases that were getting scheduled for an interview, they would go to their first interview and then they would tell them that the case would get stuck in admin processing, like for years. I had cases where I had a husband and wife interviewed at the same time. The wife would get her visa, issued her visa a week later, and the husband was stuck in admin processing for another year. They wouldn't issue him a visa for a whole year. And anytime that we would inquire, follow up, it's stuck in administrative processing. We're doing background checks. And they wouldn't even give us there was no more information than that. We even got our congressional representatives involved. Even when we would do that, the information that we would get back or the response that we would get back is that it's just stuck in admin processing. So that's definitely an issue across the board that I had to deal with my cases. Like I think for my cases from any Muslim countries, and especially Afghanistan. Like I had this one case where I think the husband, he made the mistake of telling them that he was a teacher during the Taliban regime. And that's why his case got held up or like it got stuck in administrative processing because they took that to mean that he worked for the Taliban when he really wasn't even officially a teacher. He would just teach kids in the neighborhood, like at a mosque, like 1 hour a day. And that prevented his visa from being issued for a whole year. So it's just things like that. And most of the time, these cases would, like Matthew said, it would just go into a black hole, into the black hole of administrative processing. And they would not issue a decision on the case. They wouldn't reject it or deny it, but they wouldn't also give us an approval until we filed a lawsuit. This was especially common during the Trump administration. We had to file so many lawsuits in order to just get cases moving. And most of the time, they were just sitting on these cases because, I don't know, maybe they had some suspicion or something, but they didn't have enough for a denial. But because they were afraid to grant it or they didn't want to grant it for some reason, they just kind of sat on it. And then when we would file the lawsuit or we would, send them notice that we're filing a lawsuit, within a matter of like a week or 2 weeks, we would get a decision on the case. And most of the time it was an approval.
Right.
Or a grant.
You guys both mentioned the term black hole, and that's another thing that's sort of inherent to this process, regardless of where you are, which is even if I wanted to go to a client's interview at the consulate abroad and they wanted to pay for me to go, my understanding is I wouldn't be allowed in with them. So they don't get representation. The interview is not recorded, and you have no way of knowing even who specifically did the interview so that you can communicate with them directly. You're forced to sort of send these online submissions through the website to the consulate. And typically you just get boilerplate back, if you get anything back at all. And it makes it really difficult to even advocate for your client, I guess, unless you're going to federal court and literally suing the government for failing to perform their basic duties on a case. But was Afghanistan affected by the Muslim ban? Was it one of the countries on the list? I don't even remember.
Afghanistan was not, no.
Okay. So going back to, I guess it was only a couple of weeks ago, and over the course of the last, 20 years, what were the kinds of visas that people from Afghanistan could, sort of generically apply for and get to come here?
I think one of the most common visa was the SIV visa. A lot of our interpreters who served with the U.S. forces or who assisted them were coming through the SIV process, and that in itself has its challenges and its problems in itself that people were facing and that we were assisting with. The other most common way was just family-based petitions from family members here. Those are mainly the cases that we were handling. I know of people that came here through, different exchange programs on student visas and things of that sort. And then for whatever reason, they were able to file for asylum once they got here. But mostly it was like SIV and family-based petitions that people were using to come into the country.
And so how, with the SIV process, say over the last like 2 or 3 years, how has it been working? Or has it?
Okay, so the first step in the process is to get COM approval. You have to prove that you have 2 years of service with a qualifying organization and you meet all those requirements. The issue is that COM is not really functioning. So there was a lawsuit to actually get them to begin approving cases at a reasonable rate. Then again,
what is COM?
Chief of Mission approval. So,
and is that with the U.S. Embassy or the military?
Yeah, proof that you've worked with the military, essentially. And then once that process is complete, you submit your application. The problem is that most people never make it through the first stage and they languish there for years, and especially on technicalities. For example, we have one case right now where the individual worked for 2 qualifying employers, but combined, he meets the requirements for 2 years. Separately, he does not meet the requirements for 2 years. He submitted documentation that when combined, he meets the requirements, but was rejected nevertheless, and has just been in this cycle for about 2 or 3 years, trying to get someone to recognize that he qualifies. Now he's in extreme danger with his family in Afghanistan. And of course, COVID did not necessarily help the process either. And maybe Sharifa can speak a little more to the specific effects of COVID.
Yeah, so most of our cases that were stuck in consular processing, we had, I would say, at least 3 cases from Afghanistan that were ready for an interview. Like it was documentarily complete at the NVC and ready to be scheduled for an interview at the consulate in Kabul since 2019. And because of COVID, it kept getting pushed back. And then finally, our one client who we're trying to get here because she's in a really, really dire situation, she was documentarily complete. Her husband is a U.S. citizen. Her child was born in Afghanistan, her first child. We were able to get him a U.S. passport through using a report of consular board of birth abroad. So she has a U.S. citizen child. Her husband's a U.S. citizen. Her case was documentarily complete since end of 2019, towards the end of 2019. And we were not able to get an interview for her. She finally got scheduled for an interview this past June. And then, of course, the embassy closed again due to the second wave, the Delta variant wave that was going on in Afghanistan. They pushed back her interview. She was scheduled for an interview just actually this past Wednesday. And of course, that got canceled. And, you know, we had to put her on this repatriation request. And now she's pregnant with her second child. She's like almost 9 months pregnant. She's stuck there. The husband is stuck here. She doesn't have any family there. She has a toddler and she's 8 months pregnant. I mean, she should have been here 2 years ago. And she's stuck there. And now she has to go through this mess that's at the airport to try and come here now. When we had like 3 other cases like that where we had these cases documentarily complete since 2019, and they just weren't able to get scheduled for an interview, and now they're all stuck abroad, in Afghanistan.
One thing that's frustrating about that particular delay, I think, at least from my understanding and my practice, is that in a lot of ways, the interview is kind of a formality. Like the work has basically been done. From what I understand, often the interview is a couple minutes long, 4 or 5 minutes long. They re-ask some of the questions on the form, and that's basically it. And during COVID, a lot of us had to find creative ways to do things that we'd done a different way before. And there's just been zero appetite from the government to figure out new or creative ways to handle consular processing interviews, either by just taking basic PPE measures and social distancing and that sort of a thing. Instead, things really just shut down completely.
Mm-hmm.
And the government seems sort of happy, to follow that track.
Yeah, and the other issue that I forgot to mention with these like cases that were going through the embassies is the medical exam requirement, because there's only certain clinics that were authorized to do the medical clinic. So aside from them having to wait for an interview, there was also a backlog on when they could get in for a medical exam. And that was required. They had to take the medical exam to the interview. So that was something else that was causing like another host of issues for all applicants across the board.
So listening to both of you, the process in the absent this kind of chaos that is going on right now, wasn't really working all that well. So is there any chance that this could be any type of process that kind of continues right now? Or what steps do you think should be taken now in order to first fulfill our promises that we made and to get out vulnerable people?
So, I mean, right now, we have been flooded with calls and emails and people from Afghanistan contacting us, just desperate and asking for advice on how to get out. There's no embassy in Kabul. So people that had, their family-based petitions or whatever, other than telling them, go fill out this repatriation request form, there's not much else we can tell them at this point in time because there's no embassy. And we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if they're going to reopen the embassy there on a limited basis or if they're going to send all these cases to a third country. We don't know what's going to happen. But in terms of what they can do to kind of amend the situation even a little bit right now. So from what we've been getting, the reports on the ground from our clients that we're getting, that I actually had 2 people with approved immigrant visas call me today. They got the visas. When you fill out the repatriation request form, they'll get an email from the Kabul embassy with an e-visa or a visa and instructions to the gate. They were able to get through the gate. They were able to go into the airport and they got turned away before they were about to board the plane because they said, oh, you're not supposed to be here. So I don't know what's going on. There's a lot of chaos there. And even people that are qualified to board or to be evacuated, one, they're not able to because it's a challenge and a struggle and a nightmare to get through the airport. And then even people that are able to get through all that, they're getting turned away for I don't know what reason. So we are currently looking into the option of applying for humanitarian parole for some of these people. And so one thing we would like to see is expedited and blanket approval for humanitarian parole requests for people from Afghanistan. So there's a $575 filing fee for this parole request. We'd like to get that waived, a possible blanket waiver for those cases as well, because a lot of these parole requests, a lot of attorneys are doing it on a pro bono basis. I mean, our clients are not able to pay that. And that's also something that is creating another, if they want the fee, you have to file. And the only way for us to not pay the fee is to file a fee waiver. And then we have to wait for a receipt request that adds an additional 2 weeks in the process. So one thing, I mean, this is just something that may help them a little bit, is expedited blanket approval of these humanitarian parole requests from Afghanistan and waiving the filing fee.
Just to hone in on something Sharifa said in explicit terms is that we know people on the ground who received an email from the Department of State with this visa pass to get them past the Taliban checkpoints. The email from the Department of State said, come to the airport now. We cannot guarantee your safety. These people already have immigrant visas who are documentarily complete. And as you mentioned, they're just waiting for interviews, which do not usually change the posture of a case anyway. It is merely a formality, essentially. So Department of State said, come to the airport immediately. They all come to the airport immediately, and they are refused at the airport. So there's so much chaos.
Who's refusing them?
So they have to get through several checkpoints. So first, there's checkpoints like Taliban checkpoints outside the airport. They're getting beaten up. They're getting physically assaulted. Some people are even getting killed on their way to the airport. That's the first nightmare that they have to get through. And then once they get within the airport, there's checkpoints within the airport. The last person that reported to me, they said that it was somebody from the U.S. military in uniform that refused them and said, no, you're not supposed to be here. So that's my concern. And that's another concern that I have, is that a lot of these people that are in charge of the checkpoints, these are not consular officers or people that have a background in terms of the immigration system or immigration documents. I think from the reports that I'm getting, they have members of the U.S. military there that are at the checkpoints that are looking at these documents. And so my concern is, even with this humanitarian parole request, if we are successful in even getting it, if these people at the checkpoints are given specific instructions on what people are required to show in order to be allowed to enter. And if it's just a gate pass and one of those visas, like the generic visas they've been sending around, if somebody shows up to the checkpoint with a parole request, they're not even going to know what that is. I just don't see how that's going to play out in terms of them being allowed to get in with that unless they're educated on this. And so the people at the checkpoints, they're members of the U.S. military who I guess are just given instructions on who to let in and who to not. And, this client of mine had an approved immigrant visa. He had a KBL number, NVC number. I had sent all of that to him. The problem is he also said that he had it on his phone and they were forcing them to keep their cell phones off. So he couldn't show anything to him. That was one of the issues. But he had the visa that they had sent. And he said, you're not supposed to be here. And from what I said, he said they dragged him out of the airport.
One of the things that's got to be so frustrating about that, I saw a colleague on a Facebook group post a picture of one of these emails asking basically like, is this real? Because this is, who knows, right? It's a new thing. And all of a sudden you're getting an email like, go to the airport. People want to know that it's real. And other people were saying, yeah, we also got this email. It's a real thing. So just imagine being on the ground and having this sort of chaos going on and getting this thing and being reassured like, no, this is a real email. It's a real thing. And you risk your life to get to the airport. And then the same government says, psych, just kidding.
Yeah.
And then moving forward, I mean, how do you trust anything that you get? Even getting a visa must not feel like the real thing because you don't even know if you're going to be let on a plane.
So the first frustration that we had to deal was when they sent these repatriation request form. It was over the weekend at like 3 a.m. that we got like flooded with these emails saying to fill out this form for your clients. And then the form, there's so many flaws with that form. I was talking to a group of other immigration attorneys. We were like, somebody just created this generic form on their way out the door because like that was basically a form that they used for something else, for just U.S. citizens. It asked for like U.S. citizen passport number. And then they say to use this form for anyone that is a U.S. citizen, an LPR, or someone with an approved immigrant visa petition. So our clients were calling us nonstop, asking us for instructions on how to fill out the form, which should have been self-explanatory if it was created better. But that was the first issue. And then the second issue is for our clients that we filled out the form and submitted right away over the weekend, we got an email with instructions in gate pass on Monday or Tuesday, and we sent that to them. They go there, and of course they have to deal, with the chaos at the airport where there's thousands of people waiting outside. But they were getting turned away from people like at the main gate saying that this is not going to get you in. This was sent to everybody and everybody has this. There was a glitch in the system and they sent this gate pass to everybody.
Oh, God.
So,
oh, my God.
So one thing that kind of, I don't know how to say it, but people are getting these passes that they have to show to the Taliban on the way to the airport, essentially kind of telling them like, yeah, we're connected to the US and we probably helped them. It just seems dangerous.
Not ideal.
It seems like maybe this would have been something that we thought through before. I mean, you think that maybe hindsight, we could have maybe been a little bit better prepared, perhaps? I don't know.
That's a hot take.
Yeah, definitely.
I also want to just emphasize that in the email, it specifically says we cannot guarantee your safety to the airport, and just getting to the airport is extremely, extremely dangerous. It's nothing less than these people absolutely risking their lives on a whim that this printed out visa might work. Specifically, single women who don't have male protection there are prohibited under Taliban rules from leaving their house alone. And taxis will refuse to take them to the airport because they don't want to get in trouble carrying a single woman in the back seat. So they're some of the most vulnerable people right now, and we're asking them to show up at a Taliban checkpoint.
I want to go back to the pool of available visas because we're talking about risking your life to get to the airport and being turned away for people who have already, for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years or longer, been mailing their documents to the government, subjecting themselves to background checks. Like, these people are facing this level of frustration and obstacles. And it seems like you said earlier, there's basically interpreter visas and family-based visas, which for anybody who's heard the term chain migration, that doesn't include all of your cousins and all of your nephews and nieces. It's a limited, that's a whole other very limited type of thing. Is there really nothing, there's no other visas for, like, let's say you worked on a military base or you were otherwise sympathetic to U.S. interests? There's no other type of visa or way to get here? If you haven't started a process already, it's basically impossible, right?
I'll say that most of the calls or consults that I'm getting, it's people that are in that situation asking what at this point, I'm like, listen, I can't apply for anything for you from over here because there's no embassy there. And for me to get any kind of approval from here and then send it to the embassy, they're like, it's going to be too late. We don't know what's going to happen. The only option that we have for people like that is humanitarian parole. And even with humanitarian parole, like, this is something very new for a situation like this. And we don't even know, like, we're working on one right now to see how that goes. And like I said, there's challenges in getting that approved in time. And then there's challenges in getting that to the client because there's no consulate in Kabul. And then there's also challenges in having the people at the airport recognize that as a valid document and allowing these people to come in and board the aircraft. So that's really the only option we see for people who are not a priority for evacuation purposes. I also wanted to mention that aside from SIVs and people with immigrant visas, people that are stuck in Afghanistan now, like US citizens and those with a green card, permanent residence, they are also facing the same challenges. I had somebody contact me today that said that they're a family of 5 permanent residents. They just went to Afghanistan for the summer to visit family, and they weren't allowed through the checkpoint at the airport. Like, they got turned away and said that your document is not valid when they showed them the gate pass and the email. Because the only way you can get through the gate or to get through the airport checkpoints is if you get an email from the embassy with the instructions and then the gate pass. And now they're even saying people who are showing up with those are not even being let in, regardless of their status, even if they're a green card holder and they're showing their green card. I mean, that's very concerning. If they're turning LPRs away, then I don't know how much hope I have for people with approved immigrant visas.
Right, because somebody with a green card has already been through this whole process and went to their interview and they were already granted a green card. And even there being...
Yeah, this is a family that lived here. They just went to Afghanistan for vacation. They should be allowed to board. But it's scary and it's a nightmare.
Yeah, so Matthew, do you have any other questions?
Yeah.
I actually kind of... There's the toddler, I think.
Yeah. You guys heard him.
That might be the universal sound of everyone's frustration
Everyone listening to the show right now.
There you go.
I've got 2 at home, and I'm familiar with this sound. So let me ask you one quick question, and then we'll wrap it up because you guys, I know, have much more important things to do. But I've been seeing some sort of solicitations for volunteer attorneys. I do consular processing, but I don't have any experience in that part of the world. If I were to sign up for something, is it going to be more work for people like you to train me than it's worth? Or do you think dum-dums like Matthew and I should actually be signing up and trying to get, parole requests submitted and things like that?
I think you both would be a great asset if there's an organization that you can volunteer through, because it's not like, Alexa and I had any special training. We're trying to do our best from what we can do from here, from this side of the world, in order to help these people to get things expedited. So, humanitarian parole requests, aside from doing things like this for our clients, we're also working on advocating. Like, we're meeting with our congressional representatives, we're setting up meetings. In an hour, I have a live Facebook panel where we're giving out information to people because most callers are calling with the same questions. How can I get my family out? So I think with things like this, the more lawyers that we have, I don't think there's any kind of special training or anything for this. You just kind of have to delve into it and navigate the process and see what you can do to help these people. So I think if there's an opportunity for you guys to volunteer to help these people, if it's on a pro bono basis or anything, I think that would be helpful for as many attorneys to volunteer and take initiative as possible. I mean, the least that we could do, if we can't do anything, even if you're not an immigration lawyer, you can advocate. You can get into advocating for these people because, meeting with your representatives and pushing it from this side, I think that that's the only thing that we can do for our clients, for people that are stuck there. The other thing I wanted to mention before we wrap it up is we discussed the nightmare and the chaos at the airport and the struggle and the challenges that come with that. But I've also been getting reports from clients who were successful in boarding the planes, and then the situation on the ground in the camps or, in the hangar facilities in Doha, Qatar, it's a complete mess over there as well. Like, the living conditions, it's a complete mess in terms of processing. I think there's a lot of confusion and chaos over there in terms of how these people are being processed. And then the living conditions, they're living in these hangars that looks like a container, like an equipment container. And there's one bathroom for 100 people. It's hot there. I think the temperatures are over 101 degrees, and women, children, everyone is crammed into this one container. Someone said earlier that they even have to ask permission to just go outside and get fresh air. There's no Wi-Fi. There's no food. People are sleeping on the bare ground, and they're stuck there for at least 10 days. The last report that I got is that U.S. citizens are being sent to a hotel and being processed in 2 days, and then non-U.S. citizens are being sent to these camps and they're being processed in 10 days. I don't know what they're doing in terms of what the processing entails and then what kind of status they'll enter the United States on. We're thinking it's going to be some sort of parole admission, but we're not sure in terms of, because I don't have any clients that have gone through the system and that have actually entered the U.S. yet. We're not getting any information from Department of State Department of Homeland Security in terms of like what the process is. The only information that I'm getting are reports from my clients and other Afghans that are there on the ground right now. So we also need to advocate for the situation on the ground in Doha, Qatar. Like this is something that these people are being stuck there for a week or over a week. Like it's dangerous over there, especially with COVID and everything.
Right.
So maybe that's something that we can also advocate for to see if, they can improve the situation over there once these people are out of danger.
Right. That's such a good point. I didn't even occur to me. All right. Well, Alexa and Sharifa, we really appreciate your time. We know you have more important things to be doing right now. So, but I think this is really valuable information for people who are curious about what's going on.
Yeah. So the take that people can have is that it was really kind of chaotic and difficult in the best of times. And now it's even worse. There you go.
The sad thing is, before we wrap it up, is that all of this could have been prevented if they had just taken steps, and they knew this was coming. The U.S. knew we were going to withdraw. I don't think anyone can say, okay, like no one predicted that there would be chaos like once the U.S. withdraws. Like I think everybody knew that there would be some sort of chaos once the U.S. withdraws, and especially for the SIV people. You guys had years to get your act together to get all these people in. I mean, right now they're trying to get SIVs in that have approved visas. Like not even people who are stuck in comp processing, but these are people with approved visas. Why did you not get them in sooner? Why did you not put evacuation efforts in place for these people in the past year, in the past 8 months, or in the past 3 months? You should, like all the SIV people should have been out by now. And then the people that you should be working to get out right now are the people with the immigrant visas and, LPRs, US citizens, people stuck like that. But the SIVs, they're stuck there. And that it's just frustrating because that's something that could have been prevented, in my opinion. And they just sat, and waited till the 11th hour to try and get these people out.
My favorite is that they said, well, we kind of thought we were going to have about 9 months. Like the Afghan forces were going to be able to hold off the Taliban for like 9 months, admitting that the Taliban was going to take over. Like they knew that this was going to happen, and that suddenly these Afghan forces were going to be, oh yeah, we'll fight to the death for you guys so you guys can have an orderly process to leave, without thinking like they're thinking, oh wait, you're giving us 9 months? You know what? We should like cut and run. So I don't blame any of them. If they understand what the ultimate outcome is, it is, I don't know. I'm not surprised by the lack of empathy or, humanity
planning
that we tend to show to people. But it is really distressing because you're right. Complete chaos was not going to be avoided, but we could have kind of helped as many people along as we could before we got to this point. And it's really sad.
All right, Alexa and Sharifa, good luck with everything. And if you have any other stories to share in the future, just let us know.
Will do. Thank you both so much for taking the time to do this. I think it's really important to have as much voices on this as possible. And, it brings awareness to the situation, and nobody will know unless like we're out there raising our voices in terms of like what's going on the ground, what kind of issues and challenges people are facing, even when they get out of the country. So thank you both for taking the time to do this. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, thank you.